I stared at the phone screen, reading my mom's message, which, as always, started with a neutral question about when I would come to dinner, but I already knew that the next step was to make sure that Sarah would be there. As soon as my name appeared in the family plans, her name inevitably sounded next, and even 3 years after everything happened, I had to mentally prepare for it. My stomach clenched uncomfortably, as if something inside had snapped and paused for a second before resuming its movement, but more slowly and painfully. Just reading her name, and here I am again, back in the past, where the air was heavy, time froze, and hopes crumbled to dust. I'm 28, and on paper my life looks enviable. A spacious apartment in a good neighborhood, a prestigious job at Marshall & Partners, a corner office in the city center, confidence in the future, and financial stability. But despite this, family meetings have become something for me that requires special planning, like a diplomatic mission. First you need to find out if Sarah will be there, then prepare yourself if the answer is yes, or feel relieved if she won't be there. No, Candace, she's with friends today, is the short answer, and almost immediately my mother's message arrives. Great, we'll be waiting. I exhale deeply, allowing myself to relax, because I can go there without having to put on a smile and feign indifference while everything inside is squeezed with pain and anger. Once upon a time everything was different. Once upon a time we really were a family, as much as it is possible to be one after the loss of my father. I was only 2 years old and Sarah was 3 when he died, and of course we didn't remember him. Mom always said that he was a kind and funny man, but for us he was more of a legend than a memory. Tom became our real father. He came into our lives when I was 3 years old, and he never tried to replace our real father, but he did more than many biological parents. He taught me how to ride a bike, threatened my first boyfriend like he was really going to deal with him, and then stood there, barely holding back tears, at my high school graduation. He was the one we called Dad, and it didn't require an explanation. I send a message that I'm on my way, and on the way home I think about how things used to be. Sarah and I shared a room, as sisters should. We quarreled over clothes, reconciled after 5 minutes, and laughed at night when we needed to sleep. But she always had one thing in common: she needed to have everything that I have. My toys magically ended up in her bed, my favorite sweater disappeared and then was in her closet, my friends suddenly became her friends. It was annoying, but then it seemed like something ordinary, sisterly jealousy, that's all. As I drive up to the house, I can still smell the familiar smell of Tom's lasagna, his specialty, from the car, and it makes me smile. I don't even make it to the door before he's already there, hugging me tightly and smiling. That's my girl. Just in time, dinner is almost ready. The house is cozy and warm. Mom is busy in the kitchen finishing a salad, and as soon as she sees me, she immediately starts wailing, "Honey, you're working too hard, you look tired." I laugh and shrug my shoulders. PR never sleeps, Mom, and I help set the table. We're talking about work, Tom's bowling alley, Mom's garden, and the usual things a normal family lives by. But I know that there is something invisible in this room, something that cannot be banished or ignored, this tension, this shadow, because of which I still cannot just come to dinner without specifying in advance whether Sarah will be there. 3 years ago, I thought I'd thought of everything. Jake and I had been together since we were seniors in college, and he was perfect, successful, funny, and kind. We made plans, chose a place for the wedding, sent out invitations, everything was perfect. 2 months before the celebration, I decided to surprise him by bringing him lunch. I still remember the sound of my heels on its wooden floor. I remember how the sun softly illuminated the room, how easily the curtains fluttered in the draft. And then I saw them. My fiancé and my sister. Tangled in his sheets, they merged into one whole. They didn't even notice me right away. Against the background of this picture, I had a monstrously clear picture of my wedding dress hanging in the closet at home, the centerpieces carefully stored in my mother's garage, and hundreds of details that we had already prepared. The scream started instantly. Jake stuttered, tried to explain something, but his excuses didn't matter. Sarah just sat there, covering herself with a sheet, and looked at me. There was no trace of guilt in her eyes. Conversely, she said, "You know, you really should thank me. I've shown you who he really is. He would have changed anyway after the wedding. I'm canceling everything. The place that we chose so carefully, considered hundreds of options, argued about the color of the walls and the convenience of accommodating guests, now simply disappears from my plans. It no longer exists, as well as the future that I imagined. The flowers that we ordered in advance, choosing between delicate peonies and noble roses, now have no meaning. They can be thrown away, given away, or sold. I don't care. The dress that I've dreamed of since childhood, for which I went to dozens of salons, measuring and rejecting hundreds of options, now just hangs in the closet, and I can't even look at it without feeling a burning lump in my throat. The gifts that have already begun to arrive from relatives and friends, neatly folded in the parents' living room, now look like a mockery. Everything that until recently seemed to me the main thing, the meaning of my life, suddenly becomes nothing, emptiness, a fragment of an unfulfilled dream. We coped with pitying looks, awkward conversations, and quiet, "well, it's all for the best," from acquaintances who didn't know what to say. But the worst part was that Sarah acted as if she had done me a favor, as if her betrayal was nothing more than a perverse act of caring, a kind of manifestation of sisterly love. She didn't hide, she didn't feel ashamed, she didn't try to apologize. On the contrary, she dated him for another 6 months, posting photos of them together on social media, doing everything so that I could see, so that I knew. And then, when she got bored, she just moved on to someone else, just as easily as when she was a child she moved from my toys to her own, from my clothes to her own, from my friends to new ones. But this time, she broke something that couldn't be replaced, fixed, or repaired. My parents tried to stay neutral after everything that happened, trying to keep a balance between us. I think that's what parents do, because they should love their children equally, even if one of them betrays the other. Mom and Tom listened to my anger, nodded, and sympathized, but they never judged Sarah or alienated her from her family. She still came to Sunday dinners. She also attended family celebrations. Her children's room remained untouched, as if she could return at any moment and take her usual place. "We understand how you feel, dear," Mom said, stirring her coffee, but I could hear the uncertainty in her voice, as if she was afraid to say something wrong. "But she's still your sister." Tom tried to support me in his own clumsy but sincere way. "Time heals all wounds, baby," he said, patting my hand, but he did not realize that the time had not yet come, that my wound had just begun to heal, and every meeting with Sarah tore it anew. Every visit to my parents' house became a strategic operation for me. I wrote to my mom beforehand to make sure that the way was clear, that Sarah wouldn't suddenly appear and make me relive all this horror. But Mom didn't miss an opportunity to insert comments about her into the conversation, telling me how Sarah was doing, how she missed me, as if Sarah was the victim of this whole story, and not its culprit. "She's asking about you," Mom said one day at dinner, giving me a cautious look, as if checking my reaction. "She feels terrible about what happened." I gripped my fork tighter, plunging it into the stew. "So terrible that you had to sleep with my fiancé 2 months before the wedding?" The silence was so thick and heavy that even the appliances in the parents' hands froze. Mom nervously pushed the food around on her plate. Tom suddenly focused on the green beans, as if it were the most important thing in the world. And then that Tuesday came. I arrived at my parents' house as usual, but as soon as I entered the house, I immediately felt something was amiss. Mom and Tom were already sitting at the table, but instead of the usual comfort, there was some kind of tension in the room. Mom's eyes were red, as if she had recently cried, and Tom looked tired and aged. "What happened?" I asked, hanging my coat by the door. Mom quickly wiped her eyes with a napkin, trying to compose herself, but her voice was still shaking. "Sit down, dear. We need to talk about something." Tom, usually confident and calm, reached out and covered his mother's hand with his own. He seemed broken, somehow devastated. The doctor said I need to reduce my workload, he said softly. My blood pressure jumped, and my heart. He didn't finish, but I understood everything anyway. Mom squeezed his hand, and fear flashed in her eyes. Tom has moved to a part-time job, she continued, and I could hear how hard it was for her to say these words. We will manage, of course, but it will be difficult for a while. I looked at them both and suddenly realized how old they were, how tired they were. These people, who had given me everything, who had always been with me, now looked scared, as if for the first time they had encountered something that they could not control. Tom, who had never asked me for anything, who had always been there for me, now couldn't even look at me. How much do you need? I asked without hesitation. Mom looked up at me with a flicker of hope mixed with relief. Are you sure? That's $1,000 a month. It would help until we figure it out. I'm sure, I said without hesitation. I knew I would do it. I'll arrange the transfer tomorrow, because these are my parents, my family, and if I can help, I'll do it without even thinking. For months later, as usual, I was looking through my calendar, checking work appointments, deadlines, and personal files, when my eyes involuntarily caught on the date that was about to arrive. June 15th anniversary. 25 years since the wedding of Mom and Tom, a quarter of a century of love, care and patience, a quarter of a century of raising two girls who were not even his commitment, but whom he accepted as if they were his own. One of these girls, Sarah, went her own way, not caring what wounds she leaves on the hearts of others, and the other was sitting in the office at that moment, holding a phone in her hands, and suddenly she clearly understood what she wanted to do. This idea came to me quite unexpectedly, during one of the endless meetings with clients, where an advertising campaign for a luxury resort in Hawaii was discussed. I listened to discussions about promotion strategies, the audience, and the visual style, but suddenly all the extraneous sounds seemed to fade away, and the completely different image appeared in front of my eyes. Mom and Tom sitting on a spacious terrace bathed in the soft light of the setting sun, with glasses of cold white wine in their hands, chatting slowly, laughing. Finally, they are enjoying a moment that has been unavailable to them for so long. I remembered how, as a child, I heard them talking about how they would like to go on a trip, but then the money went to school and sections, then to a new sofa, then to Sarah's college, then to my studies, then there were always more important expenses. And now, finally, I have the opportunity to give them something they haven't even dreamed of lately. That same day, I spent my lunch break exploring hotels, comparing amenities, rereading reviews, and looking at photos. I wanted to choose something really special for them, not just a good hotel, but a place where they could feel like kings, where every day would be filled with comfort and joy. By the time I went to their house for our weekly dinner, my excitement had reached its limit. I couldn't wait to tell them about my surprise, to see their reaction. You two better sit down, I announced, literally bursting into their house without even giving myself time for the usual greetings. Mom, who was standing by the stove, looked up at me in surprise. Her hand froze in the air, clutching the spatula. What happened? I grinned, taking out my phone and opening the booking website. Yes, everything is fine. It's just that you might want to clear your schedule for the first 2 weeks of June. Tom, who had already settled down at the kitchen table, lazily sipping tea, raised an eyebrow. Why is that, baby? I paused, enjoying this moment when the tension is building and they don't even know what awaits them. Because, I said, taking a dramatic pause, you're going to Hawaii. The silence lasted only a couple of seconds, but it seemed like forever. Mom dropped the spatula, and it clattered onto the stove. What do you mean? Hawaii? Her voice was almost a whisper, full of disbelief. I turned my phone to them, showing them photos of the hotel, snow-white sand, a huge infinity pool that seemed to merge with the horizon, elegant rooms with ocean views. A luxury resort right on the beach, an infinity pool, a restaurant with sunset views, first-class tickets, I scrolled down the page, listing everything that is included. 2 weeks in the Royal Hawaiian Ocean View Suite with private balcony, full package of massages and SPA treatments, private island tour. This is your 25th anniversary present. Mom covered her mouth with her hands, her eyes immediately filled with tears. Oh dear. You can and you will go, I interrupted, not allowing them to object. You've both taken care of others for so long, it's time for someone to take care of you. Tom got up, walked over to me, and wrapped me in one of his tight, secure hugs. That's too much, honey. Nothing can be too much for the best parents in the world, I replied, hugging him back tighter. We spent the entire dinner discussing the trip, plans, and upcoming adventures. I showed them all the booking details, flights, tour programs, and told them about the additional services I had included to make their trip perfect. Mom kept wiping her eyes, looking through the photos of the hotel over and over again, her face beaming with delight like I hadn't seen it in a very long time. I urgently need to buy a new swimsuit, she suddenly announced, her voice trembling with excitement. And a beach hat, I added with a smile. Oh, and sunscreen. Tom, we need to find you the right clothes for the beach. Tom just shook his head, grinning. I can't remember the last time we had a real vacation, Mom said dreamily, her fingers still clutching the phone with photos of the resort. Then it's time to fix this, I said, watching their faces glow with happiness. They talked about how they would swim in the ocean for hours, how my mother was going to read books to the sound of the waves, how they would walk along the beach holding hands, and for the first time in a long time, I felt really warm in my soul. I had already paid for everything. I explained this to my mom and Tom, showing them emails with booking confirmations, service lists, and trip details, so that there would be no doubt, so that they could not refuse, because I knew them. I knew how they used to save money in everything, how they always put someone else's the needs are above their own, as they could say that they don't need it, just to avoid spending extra money. All you have to do is pack your bags and come to the airport, I said with a smile, rejoicing at how their faces were beaming with joy, almost childlike delight. Mom couldn't stand it first. She jumped up from her seat and hugged me so tightly that I felt the moisture of her tears on my shoulder. You're such a good daughter, Candace. We are so lucky to have you. I just snuggled closer to her, glad that I could give them at least that much. The day before their departure, I was making up my schedule to set aside time to take them to the airport, planning the route in advance so as not to get into traffic jams, when the bell rang. Mom's name appeared on the screen. Hi, honey, her voice sounded a little higher than usual, as if she was trying to hide her excitement or uncertainty. About tomorrow, I began, switching to the calendar. I've already planned everything. I'll take a long lunch break and take you to the airport. Oh no, Mom hurriedly interrupted me. You don't have to do that. We'll just take a taxi. I frowned, not expecting such an answer. Mom, it's not a problem, really. I want to see you off. Dear, we don't want you to be distracted from your work. You're so busy with this new client campaign. There was something strange in her voice, something that made me feel like she was trying to hide something, but I couldn't figure out what it was. Are you sure? It's really not difficult for me. We're sure, she interrupted me again, this time more firmly, leaving no room for further persuasion. The taxi has already been ordered. I leaned back in my office chair, feeling a strange unease rise inside me. Well, okay, if you're sure, absolutely sure. Absolutely, her reply came too quickly, too categorically. I need to finish packing. We'll call you later. After hanging up, I just stared at the phone for a few seconds, trying to get rid of the unpleasant feeling, but something was bothering me. A minute later, I dialed her number again. I'm sorry, I was just thinking about one thing. I can come in and water your flowers while you're gone. Your roses attract attention every day, they need care in this heat. There was a pause on the other end of the line, barely noticeable, but too long for a normal conversation. "Oh, don't worry," Mom finally replied, her voice sounding a little strained. "Mrs. Johnson, the neighbor, has already agreed to deal with this." "Mrs. Johnson?" I asked, incredulous. "The one who killed her own garden." "She got much better last summer," Mom hurriedly added. A slight nervousness could be heard in her voice. "Actually, it's all settled. Focus on your work." I was sitting in my apartment this evening, trying to get rid of the strange feeling that had settled in me after our conversation. I told myself that Mom was just excited about the trip, that maybe she was uncomfortable that I had done so much for them, that she just didn't want to burden me, but something inside bothered me. The next day, I trudged through my work tasks, constantly glancing at my phone, waiting for news. Finally, at 5:30 p.m., a message arrived. "On a plane taking off. Thank you again for this amazing gift, sweetheart." I smiled, imagining them sitting comfortably in first-class seats, Mom already dreaming of a pool, and Tom probably grumbling about eating too much, but secretly enjoying the comfort. But on the way home, from somewhere, I had a desire to stop by their place, check if everything was locked, if everything was in order, make sure that I hadn't forgotten anything. When I turned into the familiar neighborhood where I spent my childhood, the streets were quiet, bathed in the soft light of sunset. I was already mentally rehearsing what I would say to Mrs. Johnson if she noticed me looking around the house, but then she saw this. Warm light streamed from the living room windows, its golden glow reflected on Mom's rose bushes, making them seem even brighter. I slowed down. An uneasy feeling flared up inside, because this house was supposed to be dark, empty, the doors locked, the curtains drawn. But the light was on. I glanced at the facade, hoping that maybe the neighbor had just come in to check on something, but then I noticed the blue flicker of the TV behind the curtains. The TV was on. I looked at my watch. At that moment, their plane was supposed to be at 30,000 feet, taking them towards a long-awaited vacation. But someone was in their house. My first reaction was to grab my phone and call the police. Someone broke into my parents' house. Someone turned on the light, sat down in front of the TV, as if they felt completely at ease here. But then my gaze fell on my mother's garden gnomes, one of which always stood at the front door, slightly tilted to one side, as if guarding the house. The robber wouldn't have left it in place, wouldn't have taken care of such details, which means it wasn't a break-in. My fingers twitched as I felt the old house key in my purse, the one I always carried with me, even when I moved into my own apartment. I took a deep breath, trying to get a grip on myself, before walking to the door, trying to move as quietly as possible. The muffled sound of the TV came from the living room. Sports news. ESN Sports Center. Tom's evening routine. My stomach clenched, and a cold wave ran through my entire body as my fingers slowly turned the key in the lock. The door swung gently inward, and I took a step forward. There, in the living room, Tom was sprawled out in his favorite armchair. He was holding a beer in one hand, his legs were propped up on a coffee table, and footage of another baseball game was flashing on the TV screen. He heard me. He turned his head. His face paled for a moment, and I noticed his fingers tightening around the bottle. "What the hell are you doing here?" My voice echoed through the house, full of icy disbelief. He swallowed, his gaze darting to the side, as if he hoped it was just a hallucination, that I would disappear if he blinked fast enough. "You should be on a plane to Hawaii. Right now. With my mom. Do you remember?" He didn't look me in the eye. Instead, his attention focused on a darkening spot on the carpet where some beer seemed to have spilled. "Listen, honey, I can explain." "Where's Mom?" Each word was harder than the previous one, each word became an icy nail hammering into the reality that I had to figure out. Tom's shoulders slumped. He somehow sagged in his chair, as if he had suddenly become smaller, older, weaker. She left with Sarah." The room spun. Sarah has been having a hard time lately, he stammered, avoiding my gaze, as if hoping it would make his words less painful. Financial problems. Depression. Your mother thought she needed this trip more than I did. I looked at him, but he couldn't look at me. After all, the money you send us every month really helped her get back on her feet. All the sounds disappeared. The world froze for a moment. What kind of money? He realized his mistake. I saw it in his eyes, in the way his face suddenly distorted, in the way he inhaled too sharply. I felt my heart sink down somewhere, as icy fingers of doubt closed around my throat. What kind of money, Tom? But I already knew the answer. The thousands of dollars I sent them every month, money that I thought helped them deal with Tom's health problems, with all the expenses they were so careful not to mention. All of them were not for medical treatment, not to pay bills, not to make life easier for those whom I considered my family. They were walking towards Sarah. Your mother. We thought. You thought I wouldn't want to help her. My voice sounded menacingly calm, even, almost lifeless. He nodded. You lied to me. 4 months. He took my money and gave it to her. I took a step back, feeling a wave of rage slowly but surely rising inside, burning everything in its path. And now you let her steal my anniversary present for you. She. He reached for me, but I stepped back even further. In front of me was the man who taught me how to ride a bike, who threatened my first boyfriend if he broke my heart, who held my hand when I thought I was getting married, and then stayed by my side when everything collapsed. But now he was a stranger. Please, Candace. Save her, I raised my hand, stopping him. I don't want to hear about poor, unhappy Sarah anymore. I turned around and walked out the door, and the night air hit me in the face, but it didn't cool my racing pulse, didn't stop my hands from shaking, didn't muffle the ringing in my ears. I got in the car and started the engine, but my fingers were shaking so much that I could barely hold the steering wheel. I took one last look in the rearview mirror. Tom stood in the doorway, his silhouette illuminated by the warm porch light. He looked lost. Small. But I didn't feel sorry for him anymore. The road home was a blur. Hundreds of thoughts were spinning in my head, one memory replaced another, every family dinner, every conversation, every time my mother stealthily asked about monthly transfers, saying that everything was going to support at home, that it just helps them feel a little more confident. How long have they been planning this? How many more lies have they told me? I pulled into the parking lot of my apartment complex, but after turning off the engine, I couldn't bring myself to open the door and get out of the car. I sat motionless, clutching the steering wheel, and felt the waves of betrayal that had washed over me over the past few hours. My mother. My stepfather. 2 people I loved, trusted, and tried my best for, without even thinking that they could use me, deceive me, lie to my face, choosing the right words and fake smiles. And Sarah. Always Sarah. Taking, absorbing, appropriating everything that ever belonged to me, not because she needed it, but because she just could. I entered the apartment, went to the kitchen and sat down at the table, automatically opening my laptop, trying to suppress the flame of anger that was raging inside me. Long, deep breaths did not help, thoughts did not stop rushing chaotically, but in this chaos one logical, cold, and extremely clear plan gradually emerged. The time difference. According to my calculations, the plane had already landed at that moment. They were probably heading to the hotel, where I spent weeks choosing the best room, with a panoramic view of the ocean, with all the amenities that could make this vacation unforgettable. For Mom and Tom. But not for her. I opened the hotel's website, found the reception's phone number, and dialed it, tapping my fingers on the countertop while the beeps were ringing. Royal Hawaiian, how can I help you? A pleasant, cheerful voice rang out. Hello, my voice sounded surprisingly even calm. I need to cancel my reservation immediately. Of course. In what name is the reservation registered? Candace Mitchell. I heard the administrator clicking the mouse, checking the information. Oh yes, I see your reservation. 2 weeks, Ocean View Suite, due to check in today. He paused, clearly hesitating. Is everything okay? No, I replied coldly. I need to cancel it. Right now. I understand. We have penalties for late cancellation. I don't care about the fine, I cut him off. Just cancel. A short pause, then, okay, I'll handle the cancellation. One problem has been solved. Now the next one. I logged into my airline account. 2 first-class round-trip tickets scheduled for 2 weeks of luxury vacation. Cancel. Confirm. Done. I was about to close the laptop when an impulsive thought, not even a thought, but something painful, throbbing in the depths of my subconscious, made me freeze. I haven't looked at her social media for a long time. I blocked her after the night I found her in bed with Jake. But now I needed to see. I created a fake account, typed in her name in the search, and here she is. Her page is open, accessible, and demonstrative. What I saw didn't surprise me, but it made me feel sick. Photo. Sarah was wearing designer clothes that I knew she couldn't afford. Sarah in front of high-end restaurants, a glass of champagne in her hand, looking at the camera, smug, confident, defiant. Living my best life for someone else's money. I scrolled on. Why pay when others will do it for you? Another day of luxury, courtesy of my secret admirer. God. I scrolled through the tape further, my heart beating somewhere in my throat, my fingers tensed on the mouse until I saw what I was looking for. Today is the day. Airport waiting room. Sarah is wearing a light linen dress, sunglasses on her head, a wide smile, and next to her is her mother, just as happy, just as satisfied. They pose in front of the first-class counter, with the reception desk in the background. I'm going to Hawaii for a vacation. I deserve someone special to make my dreams come true. There are hundreds of comments under the photo. Oh my God, girl, your new man must be on a roll. Spill the tea. Who is this mysterious sponsor? First class. You have to tell us who he is. Sarah's answers are emoticons, winking emojis, phrases like, the lady who never kisses or talks. She knew. She knew exactly what she was doing. Flaunting my money. My gift. My generosity. And Mom was standing next to me, like it was completely normal. I felt myself start to shake. Not out of resentment. Not from the pain. Out of rage. Good. If she wants a luxurious life at someone else's expense, let her try to enjoy her vacation without a paid hotel, without tickets back, without a chance at anything other than her usual fraud. I wasn't going to be her victim anymore. I closed my laptop, feeling the adrenaline that had been pumping me for the last few hours slowly recede, leaving a void in its wake. I needed to do something familiar, mechanical, to keep myself from exploding, and I went to the kitchen, knowing that only routine movements would help me calm down. I took out the coffee grinder, filled the beans, listening to the familiar rhythmic crackle of coffee beans being ground under knives, then turned on the kettle, watching the water slowly boil, and finally poured the fragrant coffee grounds into a ceramic funnel, evenly filling it with hot water. The smell of freshly brewed coffee filled the kitchen, and I took a deep breath, trying to force myself to relax. Now all that remained was to wait. My phone started vibrating exactly 90 minutes after I canceled everything. Mom's name appeared on the screen. I didn't move. I watched as the call continued until it was reset on its own, then again, and again, and again. 10 times. I counted them, indifferently sipping my coffee, which had already started to cool, dropping each call into voicemail, until the 11th rang, and I finally answered. Candace. Mom's voice was sharp, on the verge of panic. Something's wrong. The hotel says our reservation has been canceled. There must have been a mistake. I was silent. Then, surprised at her own evenness, she said, No mistake. There was silence. What do you mean? What is it? She asked, more slowly now, realizing. Did you cancel it? But, she paused, as if she didn't know what to say, as if she was looking for a way to convince me that I had misheard, that it couldn't be true. But why? I stopped by your house. I deliberately pronounced each word slowly and clearly. It's funny, but Tom was there. He was watching TV. He wasn't in Hawaii. Another pause. Longer this time. When my mother spoke again, her voice had changed. It became calm, restrained, the same businesslike tone that I remembered from childhood, the tone in which she explained to clients why their requests could not be fulfilled, but with a note of fake gentleness, as if she were talking to a moody child. Honey, let me explain. Your father and I discussed it, and we decided that Sarah needed this vacation more than he did. He voluntarily gave up his seat. As if it were a charity. It's like I just donated money to a good cause. $1,000 every month. My words came out as sharp as shards of glass. She needed help. Mom's voice faltered. And we knew you wouldn't understand. You're right. I don't understand. I felt everything inside me shrink, but not from pain, but from icy anger. I don't understand how my own mother could lie to my face for months. I don't understand how you could take my present for your anniversary and give it to my sister, who slept with my fiancé. Oh, for God's sake. Mom exploded, her voice rising sharply. Are you still holding on to this? That was 3 years ago. You need to grow up and accept it. My laughter was empty, dry, and completely joyless. Accept it? How did you come to terms with stealing my money? Mom exhaled heavily. Well, guess what? I continued. I canceled your tickets back. I hope you've saved at least some of the money you extorted from me. What are you doing? Her voice rose sharply by an octave, almost screeching. You can't do this, Candace Mitchell. You will fix it immediately. You're being childish and vindictive. Do you really want to leave your mother and sister alone in Hawaii? You should have thought about that before lying to me. Before I let Sarah mock me on social media, for my own money. I pressed the red button, dropping the call before she could answer. The messages started pouring in almost immediately. Please, honey, don't do this to us. Let's just talk when we get back. You're breaking my heart. But then the tone changed. You selfish, ungrateful child. After everything we've done for you. You're just jealous of your sister's happiness. You're dead to me if you don't fix this right now. I watched as the notifications multiplied, one after the other, each more desperate or angrier than the last, and the feeling that I was losing my mother was replaced by the realization that maybe I'd never really known her. A message from Sarah came from an unknown number around midnight. You think you're better than everyone else, right? Well, guess what? You're just pathetic, jealous, angry, who can't stand that I'm happy. Mom's right about you. You're a jerk. Have fun alone in your apartment while we enjoy Hawaii. I stared at the screen, feeling a cold, indifferent calm spread through my body. They still thought they had one. They didn't know yet that the hotel staff would wake them up tomorrow morning to inform them that they had to vacate the room. They didn't know yet that their tickets home no longer existed. They didn't know yet that the money they stole from me wouldn't be able to pay for their return trip. And Sarah didn't know yet that if there's anyone in this world who can ruin her life the way she ruined mine, it's me. I blocked her number without bothering to answer. Then she blocked Mom. Then Tom. I just removed them all from my life with a flick of my finger, just as easily as they once cut me out of their lives. A TV screen was flickering in the background, where some kind of cooking show was on, in which everyone was kind to each other, where problems were solved in 30 minutes, where no one betrayed anyone, did not lie, did not take advantage of someone else's kindness, but simply existed in a cozy world of perfect editing. A week has passed. I didn't think about them. Or at least I tried not to think. And then Aunt Linda called. "They're staying in a paradise somewhere," she said, lowering her voice slightly, as if I wasn't supposed to know about it. I sighed, closed my eyes, and ran my hand over my face. "I didn't ask, Linda." But she continued, as if she hadn't heard me or was too eager to share the news she considered important. "It's certainly not Royal Hawaiian. Your mom had to use up her entire credit card to withdraw anything, and Sarah, well, Sarah." I didn't answer. "They flew back as a housekeeper anyway," she added, as if giving me another detail to think about. "Sarah complained about the legroom all the time." I could imagine that. I could imagine her annoyed look, rolling her eyes, indignant sighs, as if sitting among ordinary people was an insult to her carefully constructed image. "Your mom told me not to tell you about it." She stopped talking. "But?" I asked, even though I knew what was coming. "But honestly, I think you had every right to do what you did." I closed my eyes. "Thank you, Linda." The next few weeks passed in a haze of work and quiet evenings alone. I redid my apartment, repainted the walls, changed the curtains, started going to yoga, and had dinner in the evenings with friends who didn't know about my family drama and didn't ask unnecessary questions, just accepted me for who I am, without expecting anything in return. Life went on. And then, exactly 1 month after that night when I left them without tickets back, an unknown number lit up on my phone. I knew immediately who it was. "Where is the money for this month?" Her mother's voice was sharp, cold, without the slightest hint of politeness. "No, hi, no, how are you, just a requirement." I almost laughed. "Are you serious?" "Of course, seriously." There was a hint of annoyance in her voice, as if I were a moody child who wasn't fulfilling my duties. "Sarah is in need." "Sarah needs a job," I interrupted, not hiding my sarcasm. "I finished financing her lifestyle." There was a tense pause. "Is that how it's going to be?" Mom's voice turned icy. There was no longer any pleading or pity in it, just a cold statement of fact. "You're just going to cut off your family?" I laughed. Bitter, dry, without a drop of fun. Family? I felt the same chilling anger that had been gripping me for a month now, permeating my entire being. "You mean the people who've been lying to me for months? Who took advantage of my generosity? Who stole my gift and turned it into some kind of dumb joke? If you do that..." Mom paused, but then she spoke again, her voice dangerously low. "If you stop helping us, you will cut yourself off from your family." The irony was almost too strong. "No, Mom." I leaned forward, feeling my heart beating steadily and confidently in my chest. "You cut me off the moment you decided to lie. Monthly payments, vacations. These were just the last nails in the coffin." She was breathing heavily into the phone. "Don't call me anymore." I pressed the red button. It's been 4 months. Sometimes I drive past their house on my way somewhere on business. Mom's roses are wilting. Mrs. Johnson, as it turns out, is not a very good gardener. The porch swing where I first kissed when I was 16 is peeling and needs a new coat of paint. Tom's car is always parked in the driveway. I heard from Aunt Linda that his health has really deteriorated. Sometimes I wondered if I could have done things differently. Be more understanding of Sarah's supposed depression. More forgiving of Mom's misguided attempts to help her beloved daughter. More accepting of Tom's passivity, who always just watched and did nothing. And then I remember Sarah's social media posts flaunting my money. Mom's everyday lies at dinner. Tom, sitting in the house, covering for both of them. The years when Sarah took, and everyone around allowed her to do it. Some betrayals leave traces that don't disappear. Some trust, once destroyed, cannot be restored. Some family ties are not bonds at all, but chains, which need to be broken.